All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Vote Well, Hopewell. My name is Rachel Bourne. I am a resident of Hopewell Borough since 2019 and fortunate enough to call it home. So I am so glad we are joined by our mayoral candidate and our council candidates for Hopewell Borough. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Hopewell Valley for sponsoring this event. I want to start with an acknowledgement of those who inhabited the land for over 9,000 years. The Lenape people have lived in this Hopewell area for the last at least 9,000 years. And in our acknowledgement of the continued presence of the Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanin that there be harmony between the indigenous people of the land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. And to learn more about the Lenape and their ancestors in Hopewell Valley Historical Society put together this amazing presentation. Ian Burrow cataloged, gosh, I don't remember the number. It was a lot of artifacts. And you can find this video on YouTube. And then I also want to acknowledge the labor of we must acknowledge that much of what we know of the country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic trafficking of their people, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. And we are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impacts that can still be felt and witnessed today. And to learn more about this and how it particularly is in Sauerland Mountains and Central Jersey, we have the Stoutsburg-Sauerland African American Museum and 2 books written by local authors and neighbors. And so I also recommend to check these out too. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to go through registration and voting information, learn from Mayor Paul and meet Mayor and hear from mayoral candidate Ryan Kennedy, hear from our 3 council candidates, as well as go through 5 participants submitted questions. They were submitted during registration. I did not reword any of these. So some of the questions, all the questions are coming directly from those attending. And then afterward, if there's still time, we'll do an open Q&A. And so feel free to use the chat. There's also a Q&A feature, or at the very end, feel free to unmute and actually ask your question verbally. And then we'll close off with a reminder on when we get to vote. So let me go ahead and turn this on over to my colleague, Joanne.
Thank you, Karen and Rachel, and thank you for being the instigator behind this whole event. We think it's so important for people to have a chance to hear from candidates directly. And there are a few other instances out there where there's information, but you never know where people are going to find their information. So offering it in lots of different ways is really, really important. I'm going to take a minute or a couple minutes to remind you of some key things related to this coming election. As you are probably aware, the state of New Jersey's been trying to make it easier for us to participate in the voting process. But by doing that, it's gotten a little more complicated, and I'm sure we'll all settle in eventually. But in the meantime, we need to kind of just remind ourselves periodically of how it's all set up. The registration deadline is actually, I think, October 17th. I have a typo already. Yeah, October 17th. Sorry about that. It's this Tuesday. And normally we'd be panicking, but if you're not registered, but almost everybody can register online now. So you have until the end of the day on the 17th to register. If you run into somebody who's not registered, tell them it's not too late. They have all till the end of the day on Tuesday. And I'll show you where you can get some of that information. Early voting is from October 28th to November 5th. It's a significant chunk of time. Here in the Hopewell Valley, the early voting location is at the Pennington Fire Station, which is different from your regular voting location. anybody from anywhere in the county can vote in any of the county locations. So if you can get to the Pennington Fire Station to vote, go ahead. But if you happen to be in Princeton and you want to vote early, you can vote there. There's about 8 places where you can vote all around the county. They have machines that will just pull up your ballot. The hours are really pretty extensive too, especially towards the latter part of the day, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and then closing a little earlier on that Sunday, partly because then they have to get the machines down and get everything set up for the actual election day. The deadline for a vote by mail application is October 31st. I would advise people not to wait that long to send in your application, then wait to get your ballot back and then go and deposit it someplace. That I think that's cutting it kind of close. But the other wonderful thing about the way we vote now is that you don't have to rely on the post office to get it back in time. You can go to your local ballot box, and ours is over at the Hopewell Township Police Department right outside. Those ballot boxes are emptied every day by a team from that includes a Republican and a Democrat, and they go around to all of them, empty them, and just have a secure way of getting them back to the place where they'll be counted. And finally, Election Day is on November 7th this year. I got that right. So next slide, please. The state of New Jersey and our own county clerk have been doing an amazing job of making it easier to get information online and do some things we couldn't do before. You can register online, as you can see from this. I'm pointing here. You can see that there's a whole bunch of different things on the nj.gov/state/elections webpage. You can register to vote there. You can learn a little bit about student registration and student voting, since students can register when they're 17. They just can't vote until they're 18. And they go into like a queue where they're, ushered into the election process when they turn 18. There's a little bit reminding you of the 3 ways to vote that I just reviewed, some tips about in-person early voting and where the secure drop box locations are. You can also check if you're registered at your current address. So you can do that online. You can track your ballot. This requires a little advanced work on your part to actually register with the county clerk. But once that happens, especially if you're voting by mail, you can actually check to see when they receive your ballot and when they count your ballot. There's a little bit of a lag time. Don't panic, but at least you can see it. More vote by mail information, who the county election officials are, and military and overseas voting. All that is now available on this one cool website. So I have a feeling that all of you are elected, are registered and engaged and ready to do all this, but tell your friends and neighbors about it. If they say, oh, it's just too hard, send them to nj.gov/state/elections, or have them go to our League of Women Voters webpage. We have links there, or have them just call me and I'll help them figure it out. We're a small enough place, I can just do that. I'll field the phone calls. So thank you all for being engaged in this process, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the candidates have to say tonight.
Thanks, Joanne. Does anyone have questions about voting or registering before we move forward? And you can always put them in the chat, and Joanne's on chat too, so she can answer questions as the presentation is going on. Thank you. All right, so to hear from Mayor Paul first, I invited Mayor Paul because I think it's good for us to have an understanding of what the council would be walking into on day one, once elected, as well as hear what makes a really successful council person. Let me make sure I unmute you actually. Okay, I'm gonna unmute Paul. Oh no, I think he has to unmute.
If he's by phone, I think he has to hit *9.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Can you hear
Thank
me? Okay. One thing about, I'm going to make a very crude joke from a Democratic perspective about voting early. A great, one of my mentors in politics, Brendan Byrne, always said, when I die, I want to be buried in Hudson County so I could continue to vote. So having said that, what I would like to talk to people about is, before we get to issues, is what I think is a perspective, or appropriate perspective for council people. And I've said this, if you've spoken to me about this before, you've heard it, and you may want to mute me because you probably heard it 20 times. One is, this is not, if you should be elected and get an opportunity to serve, it is a volunteer position. It is not our seat. It is not our government. It is not our building. We are elected by people who trust us to run the town appropriately. So we're stewards. And I encourage everyone to keep that in mind, whatever office you're running for. And I've run that over my 40 years somehow being involved in government. But that's a critical point that you can never lose focus on. That this is not my meeting. This is not my building. Okay. Secondly, again, before we get to issues, is when you speak to people as an elected official, and even I think personally, when you speak to people as a person, especially when you're elected official, people are worried or concerned that, or they're timid about approaching an elected official. Oh, we're taking too much of your time. This really isn't important. Thanks for talking to me. No, it's important enough for them to come to you and say, I need to talk to you about this. And 99% of the time, you listen to them, and you really do listen to them. You give them a cogent answer, yes, which could result in a yes or no. But 90% of the time, they walk away from that conversation saying, at least I was heard. And that's more important than telling everyone yes or no. And I think that's one of the great things I've learned in my 40 years of government, is just, you need to listen. We're not always right, and I can attest to that multiple times. But you need to listen to people, and people appreciate being heard, and they understand a yes or a no. Now, I'll agree, if anyone wants to take challenge with this, the yes or no answer has become less acceptable in the last 2-3 years, where people just want it their way. And that's unfortunate. That's very uncivil. And I think I attribute a lot of that to social media, where people don't go and look up the facts and don't look at what's really going behind the scenes. And they look at things that someone has said with absolutely no responsibility to go and check if the facts are true. And I'm making a direct reference to allegations against a couple of us for conflicts of interest, when if people did their homework, they would realize there's no such thing there. But having said that, I encourage people to, if you're running for council, have a thick skin, but listen to people, recognize it's not your government, it's their government. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll answer any other questions. The other questions that I think that were predicated upon, or before I was asked what makes a good council person, was what are our issues? I mean, we have significant, and Ryan, you can also address this. We have significant issues about the viability of the water utility. Do we sell it? What do we do? And we have some really significant issues about debt structure going forward, especially if we're going down the road of the safe streets, which I have no problem with, but these are huge capital projects, and we need to figure out our capital budget. So having said that, I'm really just here as a placeholder. People can yell at me, but I really would like to hear from what other people have to say about how they're going to serve.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. And thank you for sharing that information. I'm going to turn over to Ryan Kennedy now, the mayoral candidate, who is going to share what they're most looking forward to going forward with the council.
Rachel, thank you so much. I want to also thank Joanne and the League of Women Voters and everyone for putting this on tonight. Every little bit of a chance we have as a community to learn about what we're doing in town and what our candidates think is an important one. And I'm just so very thankful for the effort that you've done to organize this. It's amazing actually looking to see all the people that have tuned in. And I imagine that this will go up on a video as well and help everyone make their decision in the next couple of weeks. I'm Ryan Kennedy. It's been really an honor for the past 6 years to be a member of council, and before that as a volunteer in town on nonprofits and our planning board. And I'm truly, humbled, frankly, to be the, I don't even know the word for it is. I guess I'm the Democratic nominee, as the presumptive, whatever you want to call it. I'm the nominee and candidate for mayor, and I appreciate you inviting me to add a tiny bit, frankly, of information for this process, and then happy to yield to the council candidates so that everyone can get some more information about what they need to think about and making that choice in the coming weeks. What am I excited to work on with council? Well, it's the things that I've been talking about with neighbors and my current colleagues on council for years. So first, it's affordability. Mayor Paul correctly pointed out, that the challenges we have in figuring out with our water system, but frankly, it's part of a systemic and bigger problem that we have all across New Jersey is how can we keep this a place that we can all afford to live in? How can this be a place that is welcoming to new neighbors, frankly, and people in our community who should be able to live here with us? That's people who work here, people who volunteer here. So it's a lot of pieces. It's our affordable housing policy. It's our zoning, things like ADUs, perhaps, to allow small amounts of additional, I'll call it development, but opportunities for people to share in our community with us. It's continuing, I think, our aggressive stance with the township, along with Pennington, on making sure that we're paying our fair share of our school costs. So those all go in with our water system to affordability. I also am excited to work with council and our new administrator once we're finished with that process on getting better with communications. We've made some strides over the last couple of years. We have an email list finally. We've opened the door with our partners in the township with the public safety to use the electronic system that they have perhaps for reverse 911. But getting all of our meetings on Zoom is important to me, and I hope I can work with council to do that so that you do not have to choose between participating in our government and having dinner with your family. It takes a lot, frankly, and a lot of anger sometimes, right? To be mad enough to come down to town hall and talk about something that's on your mind. I think we should be open to everyone, whether you're mad enough to come or not, frankly, and get the good ideas along with the ones that got you mad enough to come and state your mind. So that communications, sustainability. I'm excited that the groundwork is started. This is an issue or a set of issues that I think Hopewell Borough is and should be the tip of the spear ideologically. We are a community that cares so much for our environment. So I'm excited that Councilwoman McAuliffe and others are working with, and Joanne Held here wears so many hats in Hopewell Valley with her help on the green team, that next year could be the year that we finally get our Sustainable Jersey certification. It could be a year that we work towards a food waste recycling program. And of course, not just continued preservation of land around Hopewell Borough, but preservation with the fair and appropriate access that recognizes that when we preserve land, which is something I frankly am lucky to do all the time through some of my volunteer work. But every time we preserve land, it's a win for our environment, but something that we need to back up as a community with being welcoming and inclusive, because unfortunately, the downside to preservation is that every piece of open space that we've created is one less opportunity for someone to be part of our community. So only by doing both of those things together, the fair inclusion and the open space management, can we do that? Then finally, on the economic development side, this goes hand in hand with zoning, but I was excited that there's soon be hopefully a draft of our master plan reexamination to kick that process into high gear, to look at our zoning to say, well, how can we incentivize the things that our community is looking for to either help our businesses downtown, help fill the gaps where businesses haven't been successful, and to see the type of development that our community wants to see. So I'm excited to work with council on those issues. I'm excited about this format tonight and to do a lot of listening. Rachel, I'm happy to be available to help or discuss anything when I can, but I'm just as excited to turn over the mic and listen to what my current and future colleagues are going to say tonight. So thank you again, everyone, for listening, and Rachel and Joanne for putting this together.
Thanks, Ryan. And I acknowledge all of our current council members that have joined tonight too. Thank you so much for making yourself present. So council current candidates on the ballot this November. So it's Sky Morehouse, Heidi Williness, and Sherry Hook. And so what we're going to do is we'll go through just brief introductions on who you are, qualifications, and then we'll go into our pre-submitted questions. And the pre-submitted questions will have random orders. This is the only time we'll have a very set orders in the introductions. So Sky, let me go ahead and turn it on over to you.
Okay. I'm Sky Morehouse. Ryan, that was very nice. I'm glad that you were able to put out those things. That's clarifying. I'm going to do the Queen Elizabeth Act. I'm going to read my responses. I have been involved in the workings of the Hopewell Borough since Liza and I moved here in 1986. Ray Cox, at my first haircut, I don't know how many people remember Ray Cox, but he was pretty instrumental in the town. At my first haircut, he was also the barber in the borough. He saw, excuse the expression, he saw fresh meat and told me that the path to becoming helpful was through the firehouse. Being an engineer, Mayor Walker, then Bugner, who were my first mayors that I got to know, appointed me zoning officer. And I have not looked back with regret since. It has been pretty much a continuous service since 1986, 87. I would like to continue my work, help get the DPW facility rehabilitated, the water system on track either to remain a borough function or sell the asset to a larger water utility, and continue to watch and manage the town's debt to asset ratio. Thank you.
Thank you, Sky. Heidi?
Hi, my name is Heidi Williness, and I have lived in the borough since 2006. And this is my first time running for council. I have, ever since moving here, I've just been an active and involved volunteer in the town, with things like the Hopewell Harvest Fair, the Hopewell Valley Girl Scouts, Hope Rises Up, more recently on the Economic Development Committee. And I spearhead the Downtown Hopewell initiative, which is sort of a marketing campaign for the merchant community. And I am the owner of Dandelion Wishes, which is a small business on West Broad Street. And so I'm hoping to bring that voice of small merchants also to council. And pardon my voice and whatever, I'm also on day 12 of COVID. So thank you for having this virtually.
Thanks, Heidi. And Sherry?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Hook, and I, much like my other colleagues, I have a real passion for Hopewell, and I have since I moved here almost 10 years ago. And I've been thinking a lot about this question, why are you qualified to run for council? And, I thought about my professional career. I thought about my volunteer life since I moved here, much like Heidi, been involved in volunteering with lots of things. I just got off my porch from Porch Fest. And there's something about this town that is incredibly special. So the reason I'm running, I think, is the same reason I'm qualified to run, because I really care about maintaining this town to be the place that it is. It's not for everyone. You have to love living in old houses. You have to leave dandelions in your lawn so that we can take care of the bees. It's a really special place. And you have to do things like, Porch Fest, welcome people onto your lawn, and which is the thing that I think that I'm really good at, that I've developed in my adult life, being able to create community, which is the same thing I think you do as a council person. You have to really listen to what people are saying and try to represent their voice to the rest of council. But you have to balance what's good for the town. We can't meet everyone's needs, but I think collectively, if we can meet the needs of what people want, but the reality of the things that Ryan said and Sky said, what the town actually has to do, the unfun things in the background that take real work. I think you bring those two things together and we can maintain Hopewell Borough as the place that we love and we want to continue to love. I'm not going anywhere ever, so I wanted to stay that way.
Thank you. All right, so this is, as we had mentioned previously, this is the third time, if not more, that our candidates have actually answered questions. So I want to point everyone to other locations that you can see questions that you might not see answered tonight. Like I said, we have participants submitted questions, which actually do differ from the ones in Mercer Me, for example, where our candidates have already answered about water supply, housing affordability, pedestrian and bike safety, retail cannabis, empty storefronts, and how to celebrate the country's anniversary. If you want more information on what they are running on in these topics, I recommend Mercer Me September 25th. Our Hopewell Valley League of Women Voters has also interviewed and put out YouTube videos where our candidates answered 3 questions, mostly about the business community, bike and pedestrian safety, and then any other challenges that they saw in the borough and how they would address them. So for those questions and those answers, you can access those sources. For tonight, we have 5. And again, I did not reword these, but the first question, and I'm going to randomly pick using a cup, Community Day Music Festival of Hopewell. I wasn't here, but I'm sure it was wonderful. So I'm going to pick names out of here so we know which order. But the first question that was submitted is, what was the event and/or issue that got you first interested in wanting to get more involved? And the first person to answer is going to be Heidi.
So, okay, well, this friends and neighbors have spoken to me for many years about running for office locally. And although, as I said before, I've been involved as a volunteer level in the town in many capacities, running for elected office has never been a priority for me up until quite recently. And while there were many reasons that I have chosen to run, such as being a voice for small business, helping this town that we all love so much, there actually was a defining event that sort of made this happen for me. And it's a bit awkward, but I've decided we're a small town and most of the people on this call are my friends, so I will be very honest. Last year, when the council was considering whether or not to issue a license for a cannabis retailer in the borough, I became aware of a potential conflict of interest on the part of one of the members of the governing body. And together with several local residents, we sent a letter to the governing body expressing our concern about the conflict of interest. And we were very clear that there was no indication that this individual was actually intentionally using their office in a way to benefit their client. It really was an oversight, and we felt it was an oversight. But even the appearance of a conflict of interest is a concern and does go against the New Jersey League of Municipalities regulations. So we requested that the individual recuse themselves from all further deliberation about cannabis locations in the borough, and that the most importantly, that all of the members of the governing body redouble their efforts to be mindful about potential conflicts of interest or the appearance of them. We sort of thought that this letter would just be like, oh yes, we're going to be careful. And we thought that that would be the end of it. The official response really shocked us. We were told on the advice of the borough lawyer, there was no need for concern, that the conflict that we saw, which was that the individual that was on the governing body had a client who was opening or trying to open a cannabis dispensary in Penny, looking at having one in Hopewell. So there was a relationship. So when we were told that the official response was, it's not a conflict, we have nothing to worry about, we were truly shocked. Even though I still believe that in this particular instance, the individual was acting also in the best interest of the borough, the precedent of the response was very troubling to me. And it signaled to me that I wanted to have a more direct voice in that conversation, that borough council simply accepted the lawyer telling them that there wasn't a conflict. And I do want to make it, again, very clear. I do not think that the individual, I think it was an oversight. But since when that happened, that was my defining it. And since making that decision to run, the concerns have become even more of a reality, because despite that letter outlining our concerns, there is now a lawsuit because Mayor Anzano did have conflicts of interest regarding the winning applicant. I realize that he and I may disagree on that, but the borough is now the subject of a lawsuit. And while there are many issues to this lawsuit, the specific actions of our mayor and borough administrator were the most avoidable pieces of that lawsuit. And they have been clear, we had clearly stated our concerns in the letter, and that does concern me. Just going forward, that we need to be very mindful. Lawsuits are expensive, even when there's no ill will meant on anybody's part. It's just a matter of caution. Anyway, so I look forward to being able to work together as a council to put procedures in place that will lower these sorts of risks. And I truly appreciate that our governing body, unlike others that I have witnessed, really allows for true dialogue between themselves as well as with the public. And I believe that's an important process. And obviously there are also many other initiatives that I would like to work on, such as supporting small business, environmental support, that's safer streets. But that's my defining moment. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah.
The next person I drew was actually Sherry. What was the event or issue that got you first interested in wanting to get more involved?
Yes, I love this question, because it ties everything together for me. So I noticed that there have been empty storefronts in town, some of which have been empty since I moved here. And at first I thought it was COVID related, but it's not, because some of them have remained empty. And part of my desire to keep this town vibrant really focuses on a vibrant downtown. I believe that those two things really go together. That's the reason I fell in love with Hopewell. I drove through and I saw people eating outside and walking down the streets. And And I want to really ensure a healthy downtown, because I think that that ensures a healthy community in and of itself. So I don't pretend to know why those storefronts are empty. I think that that is something that, as a I'm retired. I'm a stay-at-home mom, which actually means it's the hardest job I've ever done. It has the worst pay, but I do have time to dedicate to maybe figuring out why the reasons behind these empty storefronts. I think I have the time to dedicate to investigating ways I can be a liaison between landlords and the council and some business services from the county. So that really, if there was one real moment when this seat came up, and I thought, this is the time to do that, as well as it would be the time for me to serve alongside of the current council members, who I think have an incredible amount of experience in integrity, and as a brand new municipal servants, people that I could really learn from. So I think running the borough is incredibly complicated and time consuming, and serving alongside of people who've been doing it for a while would allow me to skip ahead in some of that learning curve. So those two things together.
Thanks, Sherry. And Sky, what was the first event that got you excited to run?
You have to unmute, Sky. We can't hear you.
Sorry, yep, unmute.
Now I have control. I had written that there was no single event that got me originally involved. And then I also wrote, being involved in local governance is an obligation that I was brought up with. But hearing Heidi and hearing Sherry is exactly why I've stayed involved all these years. There are a lot of people that are really interesting in this town, and we have always had a open and wonderful conversation, whether it be during council meetings or all times. And it's not that it's complex, but we can make it very complex if we're not careful. Money is always a problem, but at the essence of what gets me involved and interested is truly governance. We have the opportunity to talk, to argue, and truly come to solution as a group, as a governing body. And that's what I've always been inspired and enjoyed about this work. It's very satisfying, honestly, to be involved, and then also to be able to sit at Chubby's and be able to talk and answer questions, because we have sort of the inside track, and we do talk about a lot of different stuff. So that's really, I do believe that it is a personal obligation in any capacity to stay involved in our community and be active and be positive and be constructive. It's just that simple.
Thank you, Sky. So this is the fun component I did not tell the candidates about, that we're going to get to know your neighbor more on, because in the end, we are all neighbors, and it's good to know who you are, and how you interact with the town. So the first question I have, and Ryan, you get to play because you're on the ballot. What is your go-to Antimos order? I think we all have one. Feel free to unmute and share your go-to Antimos order.
Well, people who know me know I am a bit of a pizza fanatic. Growing up in this area, we've got Trenton tomato pies, we've got Nomad, but there's a hidden sleeper pizza style of Detroit pizza that Antimos actually during COVID started making, and I highly recommend checking out Antimos Detroit style pizza.
Thank you.
Are we just putting our oars in?
Yep.
I would vote for the fresh pasta.
I'm a tortellini Trey P girl. I love the tortellini Trey P. Although sometimes we just do we just do the pizza, and I'm gonna try Ryan's recommendation.
Well, my go-to is the pesto chicken, but I will tell you something that I've learned. I'm a Midwesterner, and I have learned that cheese pizza is apparently a really funny thing to order. I'm supposed to say plain because cheese is obvious. And so I would call and I would say, can I get a cheese pizza? And they would say, well, what do you want on it? I'm like, what? So now it's just easier just to order pasta because I feel like I always say the pizza.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Question 2. How should the borough better prepare for disaster recovery and critical infrastructure resiliency? First one to answer is Sherry.
This question is really interesting and pretty broad. And so I thought about it a lot. And I think the disaster that we are going to face, which should be every 100 years, is probably not going to be every 100 years, is the flooding downtown that we saw a couple of years ago. And I know this is Heidi was at the epicenter of this. And I wish we could say that would never happen again, but all the environmentalists on the call will agree with me that it probably will happen again. So I'm glad about this question. I think that there are things that the borough could do to mitigate future disasters. So I know there's federal funding available for community disaster planning. I think there's templates available. I think that we obviously have a floodplain situation. I'm not sure if technically that's the right way to say it, but that dip in Broad Street. I think there's things we can do with some of the properties that we know will get flooded again. There's that Blue Acres program that New Jersey has, which is wonderful, that they'll buy that property and turn it into an open space that could absorb more water, so the water has somewhere to go. I think there's green infrastructure we could talk about it with as we move forward with redevelopment and making sure there's more permeable spaces. I think something that Sky brought up, we need to upgrade and update our DPW equipment and allow them the best chance of handling what will happen in the future. I think that their facilities are not up to date as much as they should be. And I think that I think it's called Everbridge. That's the township emergency management contact system that I don't think has been updated in quite some time. I happened to get that text message during the water crisis over Labor Day. I think that we can work together with the township, make sure everyone, recanvass, make sure everyone gets signed up for that. So then when there is whatever, hopefully not, but whatever next disaster comes, we can have a communication with residents about what the borough can do to help.
Thanks, Sherry. Sky, you're next.
Again, I'll read and then comment. I've been serving on the local Board of Fire Commissions longer than I've been a councilman. We have a remarkably dedicated group of volunteers who help us every day to help us through and after disaster. After the last flooding event, we are now prepared with a swift water rescue team. We will also acquire a rescue boat. I don't know if you remember, but there were a couple of police officers that actually went down the river, and we were unable to get to them for lack of both training, but more certification. Removing dead trees, mitigating watershed issues, and providing safe shelter. This is another very important thing that actually has happened lately. Providing safe shelter where we can gather that has emergency power, communication, beds, food, warm, food and warm clothes are our best preparation. The firehouse now can provide those items. That's relatively new. We've had emergency power for a while, but during that flood, we found that we didn't have any warm stored clothing for folks, and we weren't prepared to actually have people spend the night in the firehouse. The removal of trees, and I noticed that we had a big one off of Greenwood just this last week. That has really impacted our. It's very expensive, but we have to continue to do it because that's going to be a bigger disaster if we have a big wind issue. It's just diligence, and obviously the watershed issue is a loaded issue because that whole business with Broad was a result of high velocity water coming down and not being buffered. We're going to continue to work. I would beg everyone on this call to be aware and thankful for the volunteers that serve both emergency medical and fire. They are of our community and have been for a very long time. And we have a couple of real stars now. And I'm going to make comment in a later question about our EMTs. So anyway, preparedness has to do with our community's ability to be able to react to fast issues. And it really is within the fire department, the emergency medical group that can help us do that. And I hope that we as a community continue to understand their importance and viability and get involved.
Thank you, Sky. And Heidi?
Well, like Sky, I want to echo my gratitude for the emergency and fire departments. I remember I had only lived here a couple of years when the first big storm hit. And I don't actually, it might have been Irene. I don't remember. I was out of town and my next door neighbor called me. And before I got back to town, the fire department had pumped out my basement. And I was like, wow, I live in a different sort of place here. So I do think they are a huge part of this formula. But I don't want to get back into a lot of the details that Sky and Sherry have gone over. But I think they were all good points. A lot of it is preventative actions that we can take. And I'm not enough of an engineer to know exactly what those are. But I think those need to be looked at. We are currently reviewing our master plan and should be incorporated into that, in terms of like, permeable surfaces and making sure that stormwater runoff has a place to go. That can all be incorporated into the master plan, and this is the perfect time to do that. We also need to make sure that we have efficient and effective methods of communication in place that work well. And I think that we are working on that. I don't think we're quite there yet, but that's a huge part of it, because if you have a place for people to go, but if they don't know that it's there, then that's not going to be helpful. And I think also, given our borough's small size and our modest budget, we need to leverage those state and federal grants, as well as partner with nonprofits and other municipalities to kind of get the most bang for our buck with our small dollar. That's it.
Thanks, Heidi. All right. Question, get to know your neighbor number 2. What was your first concert? And, or you can answer both or one. What was your favorite concert? Again, just to get to know who you are a bit more.
Do we just shout it out?
Yeah, yep, those on the ballot.
My first concert was Simple Minds, and my favorite concert was seeing Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel at the same time in Madison Square Garden when I was in college.
That's pretty.
Guy, you're quiet, so I'll go. My first concert was Rolling Stones Steel Wheels tour. Still probably my favorite band. A favorite concert, man, that's hard because I've seen a lot. I mean, can I be like super cheesy and say it was the ones that just happened on my front porch? Because that was awesome.
Yeah, that was good.
You'll go for it.
Good answer.
I'll say first concert, my parents were Parrot Heads, so actually it was brought out probably inappropriately to a Jimmy Buffett concert.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a drag. Madame Butterfly at the Met as a 16-year-old was just about as astonishing as anything I could possibly imagine. It's hard to believe that a young male could actually cry at a performance.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those fun memories. Question 3, do you support a library facility everyone can access? And first one to answer this is Sky.
Well, the answer is yes. And for those people who don't know me, I have served on the library board for, actually, I don't know how many years, but at least 8. And I have also been witness to we're now going to go into a second round of evaluation as to whether we want to continue in our little red brick house or have a new building. We're going to enter into an evaluation, a new evaluation, and I've asked Woody to conduct a third-party evaluation of both the old building and a new building. Paul Anzano is spearheading, and we're moving forward on having a very interesting group, because the Hopewell Library, the museum, the First Baptist or Old School Baptist Meeting House now, the churches around town are all providing public venue for our use. And what I want to do over the course of the next 6 months or shorter is, and Paul is, as I said, driving the boat, is get all those folks together in one room and actually talk it through as to how, let's just say, how we would format a new library building that would actually provide the most amount of return on our investment. The biggest problem with the new library building is purely the magnitude of the investment, which is probably going to be in and around $4 million. And according to our analysis, it would have to be privately raised because the borough doesn't have the capacity to do that work. But what I would like to do is I would like to run an evaluation and truly look at the old building, really look at the old building and find out how we can make it a little bit more ADA compliant. It probably is not going to be completely ADA compliant. It will be somewhat ADA compliant and provide better facility all the way around, because anybody who's been in that library realizes how constrained it is. We understand that. But yet there's a lot of people in town that truly do love the Little Red Library. And it's an open conversation. We're going to bring it to the public. We're going to talk about it a lot, really try to figure out what it is we want to do.
Thanks, Sky. Next one is Heidi.
Yes, I believe that a library is a core community resource, and it absolutely should be accessible to all. And as much as I love our Little Red Library, I realize that in its current state, it is not. I do not have the information or have a strong opinion on whether or not I basically need more information to know whether or not it is feasible to make the current Red Library accessible, or if a new building is needed. And I can echo Sky's sentiment that I could see that private funds would need to be raised, probably in either case. But I do believe that does need to be, accessibility needs to be a priority for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. And Sherry?
Obviously, I think obviously, yes. The answer is yes. I support accessibility to libraries. I think that the analysis that Sky mentioned has to be conducted, and we have to see what makes the best economic sense for the borough. Because what we're talking about is physical accessibility. I'm assuming that's what this question meant. But I want to talk a little bit about accessibility to the materials of the library, because that's actually a different question. And if that's what's being asked, then we already have that. And Barbara Mary, the new library director, is awesome. And she has really made sure that people have access in a variety of different ways. There's curbside delivery. She's willing to get on her bike and bike it over to your house if you have a book that you want. There's e-lending. She's reinstated the interlibrary system lending, where you can get a book from anywhere in the country and Canada. And if you want to tie in physical accessibility that's not available right now at the Little Red Library, there is the cooperative agreement with the Mercer County Library next to the high school that is physically accessible. I know it's different from coming into town if you're in the borough, but there is a library, a community library that is accessible. So materials already accessible. Building, we'll have to wait to see what Sky and his committee determine.
Thanks, Sherry. All right, get to know your neighbor. Question number 3. What is your favorite smartphone app? I think this can tell a lot about a person and how they either spend a lot of their time during the day, or that's the first thing they do when they pick up their phone.
I think I look at the weather app more than anything. I don't know that it's my favorite.
Especially lately.
And I love not just reading the New York Times, but I do like playing their games. You know?
Yeah, I have 2 little kids. So I think currently it's my screen time limiter app.
Oh, yeah. Again, this is sort of a generational thing. Maps, so I can find out where the hell I am.
That's a great.
Yeah, I'll have to second that one. Yeah.
And I'll say Yelp for me. I'm always looking for new foods to eat and new places to eat. And just a reminder, though, that if you love places that are local, help them out by giving them a good 5-star review.
Thank you. All right, question 4. What would you do to address the many ongoing fiscal challenges facing Hopewell Borough? And the first person to answer this is going to be Sky.
All right. Again, I'm going to read some and talk a little bit. At the end of the day, the borough only has so much capacity to carry the ever-increasing cost imposed by forces beyond our control. The latest 2 examples relate to stormwater management and drinking water. Both issues, through good intent, cause the borough to incur costs. We as taxpayers are obliged to pay those costs. As a governing body, we have 4 mechanisms to deal with the day in and day out costs of breathing in and out. Reduce costs, increase taxes, bond debt, and grants. The borough council currently balances all 4 to maintain our town to the residents' expectations. The next bond retirement is in 32 years. A large chunk of that debt is embedded in the green space that we enjoy every day. And that is money that we spent to get involved with the orphanage. And fortunately, Betty Johnson's estate didn't cost us anything. And also the Mercer County part and our park that way is also embedded in some of our debt. That investment is worth more to us than wasting our time and money on trivial tail chasing, is what I said. The trivial tail chasing is some of the lawsuits that Heidi mentioned. And this also tail chasing that we're going through right now. And if David Mackey is on the line with our water department and the regulatory agencies that are making it very difficult to just simply conduct our business. Again, the borough only has so much bonding capacity. It has only so much assessed value. We are very careful in maintaining that ratio below a certain percentage, 2.35% of the total assessed value. And there is no question that we are hamstrung. The only way that we can get road projects done is through the large state largesse. This water project, if we have to mitigate PFASs, we're going to have to go, the federal government is going to have to create some kind of grant program for us to be able to afford it, or we're just going to have to sell the water department. We as a small entity just simply do not have the capacity to carry $500,000 worth of processing equipment to provide us 100,000 gallons of water. It just doesn't, the math isn't going to work for us. So to that end, the 4 mechanisms that we have to work within, and, you know, I'm not a big taxer, but, you know, if you got to pay the bills, it's just sort of the same argument that we had with the water department, where we put a $40 head tax, in essence, on the use of the water. We have to pay our bills. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Guy. Sherry, you're going to answer next.
Thank you. You know, Sky's answer is, and this is very unconventional for me to say, but his answer is the reason that I would like him to stay on council this in the next 3 years. He has been really instrumental in Hopewell Borough having a AA municipal bond rating, which is outstanding. The things that he's talking about, how tight the budget is, this administration, the administration that's come before, has been extremely fiscally responsible. And so there isn't a lot of wiggle room, but I think as much as possible, they've delivered and spent tax money the right way. So it's hard to add anything to that. I have some ideas to generate, you know, some funds. I think our redevelopment areas could lead to some increased tax rateables that could generate some money. I have an idea about recycling. You know, we pay a huge amount in tipping fees, which I didn't know what that was, but you know, you pay for municipal waste removal, and then whatever it doesn't get recycled the right way, you have to they actually weigh the truck, and I'm explaining this wrong, this guy correct me, but
No, you're right.
you get to the dump, you weigh it, and if it's more than what it's supposed to be, you have to pay an additional amount. I think it was like $82,000. It was insane. And Joanne and I had a really nice meeting with TerraCycle, and in Bordentown, they have saved $50,000 by implementing a recycling program where they actually recycle their recyclables. It doesn't get put into the dump. So I know that, you know, maybe that's small change, but things like that could add up and give us a little more money that we don't have to then ask for in taxes.
Thanks, Sherry. And Heidi?
Yes, I would echo both what I and Sherry said, and I do believe that overall our current municipal government has done, I mean, they don't have a lot to work with. And I think with the exception of the one issue I raised earlier, I think they've actually done a very good job of you know, keeping a tight rein on things. And also, you know, we need to leverage state and federal grant money. We need to have partnerships. And I think, as we all know, most of our property tax dollars don't actually go, you know, most of them go beyond our control. So the school system and the county. And so we're dealing with not a huge pot to run a whole town on. One additional revenue stream that hasn't been mentioned is I do hope that we are able to go back to that cannabis license, and whether we restart the process or whatever needs to be done, but that is another potential income stream for our municipality through the taxes. And so that is just one more more resource that could be available to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. All right, last get to know you question. What part of Hopewell Borough do you encourage all of your out-of-town guests to visit? When someone comes, you're like, oh, you have to check out blah every single time.
The park, the gazebo park.
I'm gonna go back to Yelp here. I'm a restaurant guy. We've got so much amazing food in this town. I encourage all my out-of-town friends to stop by and eat with me, preferably with me.
Well, selfishly, I actually, of course, encourage them to come to my store, but but seriously, the thing that when I'm mentioning this town that stands out to me the most is the walk across. I live on West Prospect Street, and so I walked my children to school across the field, so basically through the park. And that to me is just the most magical experience, walking through that open field, especially in the early morning. Yeah, it's pretty magical.
Yeah, I just had a high school friend come and visit me, so I can tell you exactly what happened. I took her to breakfast at Chubby's. I walked her through the past a gazebo park, and then on her way out of town, I made her drive past the Awakening because that is super cool.
Wow.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, last question. If you were to look back over the last 5 years or so, and so this is, I know COVID really messed with our perception, but 5 years, not that long ago, what is the most beneficial development that you've seen in Hopewell? And our answer is going to start with Sherry.
I love this question because I really got to think about it. And what I think I came up with is it's funny because I told you the reason I got into this was because of the empty storefronts. But the thing that I think has been great over the last 5 years is that there has been continued interest in business development in Hopewell Borough. So Heidi's store, for example, that is where I go to buy all my gifts. I can't remember there not being a Chubby's. When I first moved here, Chubby's wasn't there. And it's hard to even remember that. The transfer of ownership in Borough Bean and how these businesses have really integrated into the community. So you can't go into Chubby's without seeing someone that you know. I'm really hopeful that Hopewell Bistro is going to be the same type of atmosphere. The Runyon House development, that is just really cool how the business really is thoughtful about how it ties into that feeling of Hopewell Borough. So I'm hopeful that we can continue that with these empty storefronts that I'm talking about.
Thanks, Sherry. And Sky?
I don't know your name, but why did you lose your cape? I liked your cape. 5 years is a very short horizon and small town getting things done. One of my sort of side comments was, considering it took 4 years to get a new roof on the library, and it took a lot of pushing. Some of the achievements, we continued to give good service. The DPW guys continued to provide us all with very quick and reasonable services when it comes to all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm glad we were able to hold that all together. We had a number of personnel changes, some retirements and so forth. And our guys are really quite wonderful. And I am very proud that we are able to support them as we see fit. The grant application, the successful grant application for the railroad station, that's going to be going forward relatively soon. That was $500,000. Increasing our EMS response rates, because, and I don't know how many people are on the call know that Pennington, who was responding, that entity was responding almost 1,300 calls in a year, went out, closed their doors. They are no longer responding. And we here, through the volunteers and our own people have been able to pick up the ball in a lot of that. We also regionally hired Capitol Health with one ambulance that is now responding to our calls, and we're being very successful that way. We successfully responded to a new tier assignment for stormwater management regulations, which was a big deal. Attempting to make our town a safe walking and bicycling community. Those are sort of the top. I mean, we are continuing to manage the open space. We're constantly looking for opportunities to help open space. Stony Brook Regional Sewage Authority continues to operate with us. We're going to get, because we are part of a regional organization, we are going to get a brand spanking new upgrade of our plant that's close to a $10 to $12 million project that we are going to benefit from. And Beedens Brook is going to benefit from, because we're not going to use chemical disinfections anymore. We're going to actually go to a UV system. So that's going to really help our stream and any of the other side products that come from chemical disinfection. And the fact that we're still a happy community, I think that's pretty cool. I'm glad to be part of Hopewell Borough. I really am, and I really am. It's nice to be here.
Thanks, Guy. And Heidi?
Okay. Yes. So I think that we pretty much all agree on the best part of Hopewell is the people that make Hopewell home. And that's so when I think about that, when I'm thinking about the question, there are two examples that stuck out to me over the last 5 years, and I've been here since 2006, so it's a small portion of the time since I've been here. And the first thing that came to mind for me was the reopening of Chubby's, because it is just such a neighborhood gathering place. It's this informal, wonderful connection, and bringing back, I think most of us on this call remember Chubby's from before as well with Chubby. It's a magical place. And it's not just that community gathering spot, it also has branched out and has a nonprofit as well, which just speaks to the kind of town we are. I think it's a very quintessential Hopewell place. The other thing that is, again, it's the way Hopewell solves problems is the formation of the traffic safety committee. Because in a lot of communities, you might just have residents go up and complain about problems. And this, in our community, residents went up, they said, these are the problems. They got together, they formed a committee, they put together the most amazing report with solid solutions. So it's, we're not a town that just says, complains. We come together and we work together and we find solutions. And so, and I have to give a shout out, even though I had to miss it because I'm home with COVID. I am so excited that Porch Fest came to Hopewell, that is the newest thing that has happened here. And I cannot wait till next year, because there's no way I'm going to have two Porch Fests in a row. So I will be there next time. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So that concludes our planned questions. So now it's the open Q&A for anyone in the audience. You can chat, you can unmute. And this is an opportunity, if you did not hear anything, or you've not read anything, or you haven't heard anything that you want answered before you submit a vote, or you just want to know more about, this is the opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and be silent and see if there's any questions.
I'll ask if nobody else is going to. I couldn't fit everything into the questions. You had like only 50 characters allowed, or which was very smart. We have a feral cat issue in Hopewell. What's the plan? Hart Avenue has just completely blown up with cats, and it seemed pretty stable for a while. I am not one of those wanting to eradicate cats type people. But it's gotten a little out of control, and I think licensing cats is kind of silly, and I wish I had a suggestion, but I just wanted to just address it, that we need to think about it, because not only for biodiversity reasons, birds and whatnot, once the coyotes really discover how tasty cats are, they're going to come into the town and we will never get rid of them. And with the developmental pressures with Montgomery, which is scaring me, and now Hopewell Township, we've got serious wildlife displacement. And with that comment, I'll roll into wildlife crossings and connectivity, because those are my other two green infrastructure type biodiversity, I don't know, issues that I would love to talk about. And if you don't want to, that's okay, but I had a chance to ask. So here you go. Cats and wildlife connectivity. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Honestly, anyone on the ballot, feel free to jump in.
I was not aware to the level, this is Heidi, at which the cat problem had gotten to. I do think that's an example of where we really need to sit down with some local nonprofits and, you know, find solutions, trap, neuter, release. I don't know what the answer is, but this does strike me as something that we need partnership. And this is the kind of problem I believe that the borough government working with the residents and a local nonprofit can come to a good solution for.
Well, the only way I know how to deal with it is animal control, and that's, if I'm not mistaken, and Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that Montgomery is still doing that with us. And I very seldom see animal control trucks. I know that they come in when we call them. And I know that we do have a feral cat issue, because I know that I have a couple of residents ferals in my barn here. And my wife Liza is still on the call. Save does a lot of neutering, but we have to catch them. And I don't know how to do that easily, because they are definitely wild animals.
This is Liza Morehouse. SAVE definitely can help communities do trap, neuter, release programs. They're helping one of the communities in Princeton Township, the Cherry Valley community. They work with residents to set up and monitor SAVE trap and release stations, and then do the neutering, and you can release them back in once they're neutered, obviously, and they help with rodent management and so forth. But SAVE, I know I'm on the board of SAVE, and they definitely can do that. So
It's my understanding that it's pricey through SAVE, but I guess I'm looking for more of a community rather than the residents that have to do it as individuals, if there's a way to do it with the town. Belinda told me she's not doing cats anymore. That was several months ago, but that's when she switched over to Hopewell. And then there are people with the trap and release who have issues with that. And anyway, I wasn't quite sure how to attack that. So thank you. If SAVE can,
I'll mention it to Heather, the executive director at SAVE. I'll inquire, and if she has suggestions, I can ask her to contact the borough administrator, Reggie, or whoever's our administrator. Thanks, Sky.
The other problem is the neuter and release. It doesn't solve the biodiversity issue of cats being very effective hunters.
They are. I'm gonna give you that. One of my biggest regrets I just shared was getting rid of cats in my own barn, because the rats took over. I didn't have enough cats. But anyhow, but the wildlife connectivity, I'll just bring it up. I saw a deer hit right above, and actually Hopewell responded very quickly. So thank you for that. The ambulance was trucking up 518. But it kind of goes in with the pedestrian, and we did talk about it a little bit with Krista Weaver, but I just thought it should be something, as Ryan was talking about spearheading, that could be a really great, just something to consider for the borough, to consider how to move forward and be a part of connectivity and corridors, so we're not hitting, it saves money. We don't have accidents, and there's more to that whole story too, but I just wanted to again mention it.
Rachel, I don't know, Mike, can I jump in?
Yes,
Okay,
please. Yep.
just very quickly, and I think it is something we could take up with our shared services with animal control if we're not getting the value of the programs we need. That's for us to, as a community, decide and ask for. I'll also just throw out there that, I think we have as a community made a commitment to spend more time on some of these environmental issues, and this is one that likely, if we were to tackle, could get us some points towards our Sustainable Jersey certification. So I'm excited.
Well,
I hear interest and excitement in helping us figure out these programs, implement them, and as a town put them together. I'm excited that the dialogue is there, because that's just more energy, more people we can rope under the tent, so to speak, and get these things done. So thanks for raising.
Thanks. And we have time for one more. Oh, sorry, Sherry, did you want to go?
No problem. I want to very quickly just say, Carolyn, this is a topic I know nothing about. And so I'm going to use this as a shameless plug for you to come meet me on one of my walk and talks and teach me about it, because I don't know what the issue is. So I have these walk and talks in Gazebo Park, usually Mondays and Thursdays. So I'll text you the time, but yeah, I don't know how to fix something I don't know about. So I would love to learn.
Awesome. So we have time for one more question, just so we can get out at 7:30.
Hey, can you all hear me? Cool. I was wondering if we're newcomers to Hopewell, been here a year and a half, but I was curious about if there's any mechanism other than showing up at city council meetings. Sherry, that's the first time I heard about the walk and talk. That sounds super cool. Are there other mechanisms for just citizens who have ideas to regularly be like sharing them in conversation, find other residents who are also enthusiastic about it? For example, Rachel, our fearless host of this wonderful meeting. Thank you, Rachel. We've talked about, because our daughters have gone to preschool together, now in kindergarten together, about like a library of things, the idea of having a library of things. And we're just like, well, that's super cool. Or like the idea of having a co-op, like a food co-op of some kind in town, maybe in different iterations of that, like meal sharing or like bulk food or whatever, just like finding other people who are interested in similar ideas. Bike safety. I've been a longtime bike activist, and you might have seen me riding around town with my long bike and my kids on the back and my music going and that kind of thing. So I have a lot of experience with that. I have a lot of enthusiasm for that, a lot of ideas about different things. And I imagine we just also came from Porch Fest as performers, but it's amazing to just get in conversations with the townspeople here and just realize the talent pool here is ridiculous. I mean, there's so many people with incredible backgrounds and skills, and I've been really heartened just to hear all of you speaking and realizing, man, small business owners, people who are stay-at-home moms who are like super passionate, and like Sky Morehouse with your long experience, and Ryan, we actually put on Ryan's porch, so I got to talk to Ryan afterwards. I just would love to see a gathering space. This is actually what Rachel has talked about too. How do the mechanisms for us to share, to find one another in meet space as opposed to online, and create coalitions to encounter one another, to organize, and to help community power some of these things that the borough maybe doesn't have the budget to pull off if we just pay for it that way.
Mm-hmm.
What are those mechanisms, I guess, is my question.
Yep, Heidi.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is I've been here since 2006, and like some of those ideas, I love them. Some of them are things we've done. I actually was part of a meal co-op where we shared cooking between three families. I've done that over the period of several years earlier, pre-pandemic. But I think it's a matter of it happens very organically, and the best way that it's happened for me personally is literally by volunteering. It's like whether I meet the people through the Girl Scouts or through the Hopewell Harvest Fair or whatever committee that I've joined, it's working together. The Harvest Fair for me is the most resonant example, because that's something that I'm very involved with and also really brings the whole community together. And it's, I mean, for example, the woman that Abby Stock, who no longer lives in town, but I worked with her on the Harvest Fair. We started a little meal co-op, and then I worked with Scott Fulmer on the Harvest Fair, and we brainstormed green team ideas. It's just a matter of kind of getting in there, getting your hands dirty, and I would say start by joining an organization that resonates with you. And sometimes it's just meeting people at the counter at Chubby's or in the library or at Borough Bean. Anyways, does that make sense?
I'm right on track with Heidi. It has always been organic to me, just meeting folks, talking. I am usually at Chubby's at 8:20 every Friday. And we have had a nice group of folks coming in, and we just sort of sit around and have a scrambled egg and a little bit of conversation. And it's that whole business that I was talking about before with the museum and the old school Baptist meeting house, all of that conversation about what spaces we need in the town is all based. It just sort of happened at breakfast, and we're going to try to go forward with it. It's Heidi, I'm 100% with you. It's just the way it works. You got to get involved, and and it just sort of happens.
Yeah, I would put in a plug. The Harvest Fair is October 21st this year, and one of the features of the fair is we have something called Town Square, and there are a lot of nonprofits with booths, so you can actually just kind of network with nonprofits that already exist and find out what sorts of things and activities they have going. It is a starting point. Plus just sitting under the entertainment tent, listening to music and talking to the person next to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I have to close the answers on this one just because it is 7:30. Thank you to our candidates for spending the night with us, answering questions, and for caring for our community enough to run and to serve. So thank you. Thank you to our council for serving, and for everyone who loves our beautiful town. Don't forget, Election Day is November 7th, and there's many ways to vote. And thank you all for joining us at Vote Well, Help Well. And I hope you all have a nice night.
Okay, so thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Joanne.